News is about information. This inverted pyramid was supposed to define how news is told. We followed the thumb rule of the 5 W's and 1 H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Then came other important details, eyewitness accounts for example, and ideally every news story would end with a backgrounder, to help you understand the news better. Now the reason I'm using the past tense is because this inverted triangle has become a thing of the past. Now triangles do not structure news, TRP does, that is television rating points. News is not designed to inform, it is meant to influence. Coverage has been reduced to conspiracy and journalism has become jingoism. And I come to you with a question today. Is it time to regulate TV news? The media holds a mirror up to society. But who will hold a mirror up to the media? Who will hold the press accountable? And I think we need to have this conversation now. We need regulation because self-regulation has failed. And we can't hide behind the excuse of free speech anymore to let loose lawless reporters and anchors. I will break down my argument into 4 parts. The current state of news, the existing controls, whether they've worked so far, and finally the solutions. So let me ask you 2 very simple questions. What is news and what is the role of news? To tell you the truth, to give you facts, to inform you about what's happening in the country and outside, and in a democracy there's an additional role, the media must be a watchdog. Now place this list against what you are being sold as news in India. Not my favorite example, but because all of us relate to this, the death of actor Sushant Singh Rajput. This is the episode where the Indian media has hit rock bottom, a tragic loss exploited to churn conspiracy theories. What about facts? Do they matter anymore? You've been told everything, from murder stories to supposed siphoning of money to black magic, sex and scandals, and now drugs. Who is taking what drug? What is the color of the drug? What other name is the drug known by? Relevance and responsibility have bounced. Is this news? It's a sorry joke on us. And the world sees this. From the pandemic to the Ladakh standoff to the economy, literally everything has been sidelined. It's as if nothing else is happening in this country. You don't need data to tell you that, but here it is. BARC data says Indian news channels gave more airtime to Sushant Singh Rajput's case than the surging cases of the Wuhan virus. So much for keeping you informed. What about being a watchdog? Let's not even get there. This is not news. This is entertainment. News channels making up for the shutdown of theatres and the absence of box office releases. They are giving you more masala than Bollywood ever has. And in this competition for being the most entertaining news, the media has become shrill and voyeuristic. Journalists have become judges. They play multiple roles. They frame a case. They run a media trial. They pronounce people guilty and then hammer the verdict till the person has lost his or her last shred of credibility. Where is the responsibility? Where is the accountability? So is there no regulation in the Indian media? Technically, and just technically, there is. We have around 400 news channels in this country, and we are regulated by bodies like the News Broadcasters Association or the NBA. Now, these bodies have been established by news channels. They have a code of ethics. News channels are told to ensure neutrality, abhor sex and nudity, ensure privacy, refrain from advocating or encouraging superstition. It's almost funny when I read this out, because you know how none of this is followed. Is there punitive action against those who break the code? No, there isn't. If you complain about a channel, what will this regulatory body do? It will either issue a warning to the channel or ask it to air an apology. That's it. The channel may or may not abide by this. Like I told you, these bodies are not statutory. What we have in the Indian media is self-regulation. And it doesn't help that these regulatory bodies are made up of competing channels who follow guidelines only as long as they're not affected themselves. It's a comfortable arrangement, and to be honest, it is not working. It never has. How else do you explain the coverage in the Arushi Talwar murder in 2008? The sensationalization of the Indrani Mukherjee and Sheena Bora case, the death of Sri Devi, And now we are back with another case in the middle of a pandemic, reporting on intricate personal details, tossing aside any sense of morality. The Indian media has crossed that line again and has proved the current regulators toothless. So the Supreme Court of India took up the matter. Recently, it said that TV news should be regulated. The government said, regulate the online media first, which is another debate altogether. Very relevant. But there's a lot to be fixed in TV news too. Remember, the media was part of essential services during the lockdown, along with medical professionals, along with the armed forces. So there is the Medical Council of India, there are defense service regulations, but what do we have for the media? Why should journalists be immune to regulation? And regulation does not mean censorship. And before some of you point out, I'm putting it out there in bold. I'm not against free speech or press freedom. How can I be? I'm a journalist myself. What I'm saying is that the law of the land must apply to journalists too. You cannot trespass in the name of chasing a story. You cannot violate the personal space of an individual because you're just asking a question. It is not a fundamental right, forcing someone to answer a question. And journalists are not above the law. So what is the solution? How does the world do it? And do they do it better than us? Turkey and China have total control over the media, and that's not an option because India is a democracy. So should we just self-regulate like Europe or Britain? We tried. It has not worked. Should we then have a co-regulation like Australia, where you have state regulators and non-state regulators cooperate? Or should we have statutory bodies? But here's the flip side. Government involvement could strangle media independence and compromise its role as a watchdog. What is the solution then? How can we regulate the Indian media? I'm afraid I don't have an answer, but I do have a quote. It was written more than 30 years ago in another country, in another context, but it rings true here. Journalists justify their treachery in various ways according to their temperaments. The more pompous talk about freedom of speech and the public's right to know. The least talented talk about art, and the seemliest murmur about earning a living. And since I'm talking about my peers here, I must end with this. This piece is not meant to discredit anyone. It is meant to start a conversation that many are already having amongst themselves. If the media calls itself the fourth pillar of democracy, it should stand on solid ground, not the slippery slope of ratings, pandering to the worst instincts of society. Think about it.